Welcome back to the Indiewood podcast, where we talk about indie films and how to make indie films, and the many hats we have to wear in order to make those indie films. This season, my guest is Soma Helmi, director, writer, winner of the Blacklist, I guess, because you had a script with a co-writer on a Blacklist.
The Cape and Blacklist.
Okay, I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure.
And then was also a fellow, I guess, was that the right word that they use? A fellow for the Paramount Viewfinder program, and is now going to make her first feature after 7 years in Los Angeles and many more years of making commercials in Jakarta. And today we wanted to talk about distribution because I feel like that's such a unique and nebulous thing for filmmakers coming to Los Angeles. Soma, you had 2 shorts.
Yes.
Well, if you listen to the previous episode, you would know that Soma has done more than 20 shorts so far. 24, right?
Mm-hmm.
But 2 of them ended up on Omeleto and Dusk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, 3, I think.
3, okay.
Yeah, I have 2 that I've directed on Omeleto and then 1 on Dust, yeah.
We think of short films as these calling cards that don't really do anything for our career, that you can't sell or that you can't kind of, utilize beyond showing a producer and saying, oh, this could be a feature film. But I think now in the age of YouTube, we have these opportunities to showcase them in a more, monetized, distributed fashion. I know that there's a web series that I did that found success thanks to a grant. It ended up being broadcast on TV in New York, and now it's on a small streaming platform called Real Women's Network. Yeah. And then Omeleto and Dust are huge, and Dust is owned by a company called Gunpowder and Sky, which was founded by former MTV executives. They've done a lot of really great shows. If you haven't seen a film, they did Prospect with, oh my God, Pedro Pascal, one of the biggest stars on the planet. I can't remember his name. Pedro Pascal, which was a really big film, and it was made by these 2 filmmakers out of Seattle, my hometown. But what was your experience making those films, and kind of did you know they were going to end up on those platforms when you made them, or
No.
No.
Short answer, no.
Yeah. Well, so you tell the story, I guess.
So the first one that ended up on a platform on Dust was a sci-fi short that I did a few years ago now, and it was sort of a proof of concept, I suppose, at the time, and it was just more like I had this story written out, and we, as shorts come about, producer comes on and the team comes together, you kind of have to work with people who are passionate about it, because there's not a lot of pay, and everybody has to be really into the story. So it was like this passion project, and I had my favorite DP working on it, and it just came out really wonderfully. And when we submitted it to Dust, it wasn't like a sure thing or anything like that. It was just, we were quite delighted. I think, if I'm not wrong, it came about because it had gone to a festival, and the programmers were at a festival and they saw it and asked for it. So no, it was definitely not planned. The first one, Omeleto, was Black Creek Trail, which I directed but I didn't write. We got on there, and that was a kind of a female-driven thriller. And that, again, was not like a sure thing. All of these we kind of just submitted. But the latest one, the full-service short film that I did, was I actually got a grant for it too. I was one of first 4 recipients for the Cape grant, brought to you by Julia Gao, and it was for women and female-identifying non-binary filmmakers. And I think it was really interesting because I made a comedy, and it is not really a festival film. So we weren't really planning a festival run for it. So when it got on Omeleto, it was like, this is where it belongs.
Yeah.
You know, this is where it should be, because
Yeah.
it's not a, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
festival film, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of this raunchy comedy about, with all Indonesian cast,
Oh my
you
God.
know.
Yeah.
So you would, we knew it wasn't going to do a festival run. So like I said, when Omeleto picked it up, and it's done 600,000 views in
That's
like
amazing.
6 months or something. Yeah, it's done really well there, and we were like,
That's where it belongs.
where
Yeah.
it belongs. That's
Um,
where home is, and that gets to be seen globally. And you know, I have people writing from like Africa and South America.
That's so
You
cool.
know,
Your
it's like
audience is so
super
much
fun.
bigger
Yeah.
on YouTube, you know, because you're like, oh, my
Yeah.
TV show's on, you know, Peacock. And I'm like, cool. My TV shows are all around the world.
Right.
Yeah, it's a smaller screen, but you know,
Yeah, because like
yeah.
600,000 views is nothing to sniff on. And kind of, we were talking about it with the team, and we're like, that's way more views if we did a festival than if we did a
Yeah.
festival run.
Yeah.
And it's global. And the great thing about that is I've had inquiries from production companies straight from Omeleto. Like, not even, they contacted me cold. Some very famous ones just said, hey, saw your film on Omeleto. Can we have a lunch?
Yeah.
You know, so it's a great avenue, but yeah, definitely not like, we're making it to put it on this platform.
I want to kind of champion those channels, and I think there's a couple more now cropping up beyond Dust and Amuleto, because they feel like the right place for short form content.
Yeah.
I know people are trying to make kind of, you know, Snapchat TV happen, or Quibi happen, or even kind of TikTok TV happen.
Yeah.
And there just isn't, I think, longevity for holding your phone in front of you and watching a piece of content that's more than 30 seconds long. Like, I know there are people that are doing TikTok videos for 6 minutes, and I'm like, I don't have that capacity to sit on a social media platform for 6 minutes and watch a video. So yeah, but there's that middle ground where it feels more traditional, like a TV show on YouTube.
But you have a dedicated audience.
Yeah.
They're coming there to watch a short.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're expecting that, and they do, you know, and they're also a lot of like return customers, you know, that coming in specifically. And I think Dust and Alter is the other one. It's the Dust and Alter are both from Gunpowder and Sky, and Alter is their horror
ALTER.
ALTER.
Okay.
I think it's their horror arm.
Because Dust is more sci-fi.
Yeah.
The other one is horror.
Yeah.
And then Omeleto is a different organization, right?
It's a different organization, but they also do have kind of
sub
channels, but they have the main Omeleto channel. Yeah.
And it's all for short form content.
It's all short film, really great shorts. And I think, I don't know how long those platforms have been around, but I feel like it's such a great thing for indie filmmakers.
They've been around for about a decade. I remember Prospect, the film that Gunpowder and Sky did, started off as a short film.
Yeah.
And it was shot on the original Blackmagic cinema camera, which was now 10 years old at the time. Now 10 years old, or more than 10 years old. And so that film was shot in 2013, 2014.
Oh, okay.
It's been about 10 years.
Yeah.
And then that ended up on Dust, and I think they had a deal that then brought a movie to life.
Because it is that kind of unicorn thing, right? Where a lot of people don't believe that you can get a long form from a short. Yeah. But so there's two things. I think for me, making a short film is vital for any filmmaker starting. I feel like you can't just, I don't want you to just jump straight into doing a feature, because you're not really set up for, you know, success. Because like short films are so much fun. They're where you learn your craft. They're where you can experiment with like low stakes. I feel like I'm not a really big proponent of like first time directors getting like 150 grand to do a short, because I feel like
that's too much money.
It's too much money. You're too much expectation. Like, you should just be messing around in a short.
Well, that's interesting you said that, because we just my wife and I had a conversation about this topic. She was asked to produce a film and they were going to spend $50,000 on it.
Right.
And so we were talking about like what should a short film cost?
Well,
you know, and
how long is a piece of string?
Yeah. Like, that's my question to you. What do you think a short film should cost? And at what point is it turning into like a really low budget feature?
That's a really good question, because I feel like there's so many answers to that. I think for me, I've always said, if it's your first and you don't really know what you're doing, the budget should be low.
Yeah, it should cost a sandwich for your, friend who has a camera.
Pretty much. And you're just asking for favors for all of it. Like I've made films that were zero.
Yeah.
That's obviously an exaggeration because everyone has their skills and they're bringing it to it, whatever. But like cup of
Dollars,
coffee.
Yeah. Physical money is not changing hands.
And I have, I think the biggest budget I've done is around 35, 40. But I think the 50 threshold, especially for people who already have experience and are just wanting to just really push that quality and that creativity, I feel like that's a good area to play in. But like I just don't agree with like, I don't know, first time filmmaker, because I don't know, you want to just,
because then you're gonna waste that money.
I feel I'm sure there are incredibly talented filmmakers who could take that money and make an incredible film. Yes, and you get your team behind you, but I don't know. I feel like it's just time to play and time to just figure out your voice, and you don't want to be doing that with 50K over your head, like that pressure.
There is a lot of pressure when it comes. There's people.
You're not getting that money back. I'm sorry. Even if you do get on any kind of platforms, whatever, their acquisitions are like $600. You're not going to pay that.
You're not getting anything back unless you like cut it up into like a web series and put it on and become popular and then have a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
but even then, that's
still
difficult.
That's a long shot. So I don't know. It's just like I always say, because I teach prep, to younger or beginning filmmakers, I'm like, just go out on the weekend, like spend maybe a couple $100, feed people, get some, favors in, and just experiment and play and figure out what your voice is. And but then like with people who have done it a couple of times, 50K, that's enough to like really.
I feel like that's the limit, because if you're going over 50K or if you're at 50K, even then I feel like, that's a lot of money unless you're making a lot of decisions that...
Well, and it's also if you really want to pay everybody like the minimums.
That's true.
It does shoot up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also like all the SAG laws and all that, where you have to like ULBs and all this. Those numbers, by the way, for indie filmmakers, I think for certain limits, like you have to keep it under 20, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm. I think 25 now, maybe?
I don't know. The last one I did was 20. But anyway, it's like you have to put all of that into consideration, right? Where are you putting the money?
Yeah. And I think when you start to have those conversations, like, okay, we have this money and we have to spend this money in order to make what's on the page a reality. At that point, is like, well, is what's on the page really the short film that it needs to be? Because then you start talking about artistic kind of questions, and then it becomes very, subjective at that point, because some people are like, oh no, I need 20 scenes. I need 3 locations. I need to go to, Greece.
I think there's definitely limits. And I think in a certain way, having more money is probably going to be detrimental because you're not really going to be able to learn properly, I feel like, because you're not going to know your limits. You're not going to know, because, having very like zero budget or no budget, your creativity is pushed to the limit.
You have to be so creative.
You have to be so creative, thinking outside of the box and all those kind of things. And like, that's where you should be learning all these things, so that when you do end up with like a bigger project under your belt, you're not going to lose it. There's so many first time directors and filmmakers who get onto a big set and they just don't know what they're doing, and it shows because they haven't been in that like pressure bubble where you're like, oh my god, I can't shoot this in 12 hours, it's gonna all go pear-shaped.
I still feel that today. I started a new job as a technical writer for Sony, and I kind of went from working as a journalist to this kind of big corporation. I had a small team of 5 people, to then now I'm one of the biggest companies in the world. And I choked. Like I didn't. Nobody knew. But I was sitting there and I was working, and I got into my little workflow mode, and then suddenly I could feel this, the self-doubt crept in.
Right.
I was like, oh no, I'm choking. Oh no.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I kind of rolled through the punches, but it's tough kind of if you're not prepared for those big environments.
Yeah.
And you show up in those big environments. Yeah. You're gonna choke.
Yeah, and you're also...
Literally.
Because you're also put under spotlight, right? Because if this is your first big job, or if you haven't been doing whatever bunch of shorts beforehand and this
Yeah.
is your first big thing, there's going to be even more pressure on you because producers are all going to just keep you under a microscope, so
Video
you're not
Village is
going to
gonna
get
be
as
keeping
much,
an eye
you
on
know.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think there's something to just doing it scrappy and learning and figuring it out so that you can become a better problem solver, because let's face it, as a director on set, that's one of your biggest jobs.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I worked with a cinematographer who cut their teeth doing TV. They went straight into network television from school, and that's all they knew. And so when they came onto our small little project, and we were really excited because this is they kind of fit a lot of the criteria that we were looking for. They were unsure of how to handle themselves in an environment where you had to be scrappy.
Right. Yeah.
So if you have this, knowledge base without indie film, an indie film background, you show up for an indie film project and you don't know how to be scrappy.
I think that also you get that experience as a commercial director too.
I can believe that.
Because you do have to be very creative, not just like, on the screen, but scheduling and all of that kind of stuff. You do have to be very on the ball.
The turnaround for
that.
commercials, from what I know, is it's very limited, is like immediate. You got like 2 days for prep and shoot and done, and you move on.
But also clients demand a lot more from your prep, because you're not just going to be like, here's the script and I got a shot list. It's not that. Like a lot of the times they will want a board. They will want, there's like the agency board, then you have to make a storyboard, then you have to, and you have to show everything to the client. So you have to be super extra prepped, and you have that one day, sometimes maybe there's longer shoots,
maybe two,
no contingency days, where you're like, you got that day to get it all, so make it happen.
And I remember when I wrote for a website called No Film School, I was the tech editor for a couple of years, and we talked a little bit about brands and like working with brands and how difficult it is, because not only do you have that tight turnaround, but you have to really be conscientious of the color, because sometimes a brand's color is very specific.
Yeah.
Their brand identity is very specific, and they'll have a brand book that you have to follow very closely.
Yes.
And that can be very tedious, and especially in a short turnaround time.
Which is, I think, why commercial directors are especially prepared to go into episodic.
Yeah.
Because it's a similar kind of rhythm and speed that you're going at, and you're also, quote unquote, serving a client. It's not your story.
Yeah.
You're coming in to service that, and you're coming in to honor that, but also give it a little bit of your own, quote unquote, spice, So I think that's why commercial directors deal with that transition a lot better than indie directors in a lot of ways.
That makes sense, yeah.
Because they're very much more used to working in that environment and collaborating, and also but knowing they are not top dog.
Yeah.
That's a lesson that I feel like a lot of indie directors have a trouble learning.
Because the indie folks, they wanna show off. They want to be like, look at how artistic I get.
Right. Yeah.
And for commercial people, they're like, no, we got two weeks to shoot this, like prep and shoot. Let's go.
Yeah. This is the storyboard we were given. This is what, our brief, and we got to follow that. Yes, we got to make it look as great as we can and whatever we want to add to it. But yeah.
My partner and I wrote, it was her kind of idea, her baby. I helped write it, and she was starring in it, so I directed it. And it ended up, finding life because of a grant. And I think for people looking for support for these smaller projects, I know this is kind of like the inverse of distributions. Like, how do you find money? You go for grants, you go for Kickstarter, you go for your own pocket. Right. But with this grant platform, I think it opens you up for distribution a little bit, because through that grant, it forced us to kind of go to New York and shoot New York, but also gave us an opportunity to then have the show broadcast in New York. So we were on New York, NYC Media, NYC Life. So like we had a friend call us and be like, oh, why am I seeing your face on a taxi cab? Like, oh, it's because our show is in New York now. Yeah. And through that, we had found a home on this streaming platform. And granted, it's not like, oh, it's not on, Hulu. But
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Though.
But it's we made money from it.
Yeah.
We made like $20.
I mean, still,
yeah,
most shorts you see or web series, you see nothing.
They don't see money at all. Yeah. So we're excited having kind of achieved that, that kind of success with it, because we didn't think it would go anywhere.
Right.
And then we had another friend who had a similar thing, and this was talking to my friend later on. His thought process with everything going on was everything's cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, and this was at the tail end of our web series journey, and we wanted to kind of have it be a bigger thing. And he's like, no, indie TV's dead.
Mm.
It's cyclical, because what
okay.
happens is, like something indie happens and blows up, and the studios are like, oh, that smells good. Like I want that money. And then they jump in, they eat it all up, and then it's done. It becomes the new studio thing. And then the indie thing happens again, and it's something else. It could be indie film. And I think for me, looking into the future, it's going to be indie film. So the next 10 years, I think indie film is going to have a resurgence. The studios are going to come back in, eat it all up, and then indie TV is going to come back.
So what should people be doing before that? Like if they want to do a web series, is it back to kind of publishing on YouTube, or?
From my experience, I think so, because when we had our show, it was kind of this like TV show for the internet, and it was on the tail end of, I don't want to say the tail end, but all these kind of web series had success a decade prior, maybe even more. And now we were coming in, like, we want to do this thing, but we came in at the tail end of, the new kind of cycle. And our friend who just finished a web series ended up having it on Hulu, I think, through a different, it was on a different platform. I forget which one, but they specifically made that web series for that platform. So they teamed up with that social media platform, I believe. And then they made, I believe it was Snapchat, actually. And then that ended up as a web series on Hulu for a while.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there is this kind of...
Snapchat used to be one avenue.
Exactly.
Are they still doing?
I don't think they are.
Episodic?
I'm
not sure either. I know Facebook were doing...
Everyone tried
sort of web series. So that's interesting if it's a cyclical thing. And I guess, there's cyclical and there's also like bolt of lightning, right? Like,
true. Yeah.
There's also like, did you just see the news in the last couple of days of Marc Duplass? His show, indie show called Penelope, if I'm not wrong, just got acquired by Netflix.
That's interesting.
In a very big and different move, because there was always exactly that conversation of like indie shows go nowhere. So I think everyone's very excited at him, I'm sure, especially. But so that is an interesting model. I think he has been really talking about very interesting indie models recently, and disrupting and distribution and all that. Unfortunately, I don't really understand distribution. I guess that's why we're talking about it.
his the Duplass kind of approach to things is, finding a scrappy avenue to kind of bring it back to, our digression. It's like, I remember him speaking to somebody who brought up, I have a short and I want to make this into something successful, and I don't know how to fund it. And Mark, kind of poked and prodded at his setup, and he's like, oh, well, like, you have a YouTube channel here because you want to make it about this. So it's like, start your YouTube channel, right? Gain a little bit of money, make the short, boom, you already have a built-in audience.
Right.
So like, he thinks about, film as something more than just like a movie you make and then screen. It's more of like, I don't want to say a lifestyle brand, but he thinks about it holistically in a way where, it's not just a movie, it's a lifestyle. Yeah, a lifestyle brand. I think that's a good
I think that's where a lot of filmmakers maybe stumble, me especially, because I just think as far as the point of like making it, and I don't know what to do with it.
That's why you need good partners. You need people to work with you to help you on that. Because I'm the same way. I hate producing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I want to make a movie, and I don't know what to do, or I don't want to do anything.
Well, and then you have a movie, and you're like, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So for a web series, for like independent stuff, there's this kind of avenue to take that it could end up on a streaming platform, but it does require you to kind of have it be success even on its own platform through YouTube or through Vimeo, or through a festival. Because when we were in our festival run for Stupid Cupid, there were a bunch of other web series that really had a lot of success too. Some from out of Australia, which were great, and they found a home in Australia.
There's also those like HBO Visionaries,
Yeah.
which host the shorts on HBO.
Yeah.
So there's different ways,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, to go about it.
Yeah,
For sure,
you're
for
right.
short
Yeah.
form.
And just to kind of talk more about streaming, I know this is kind of a bigger projects, but two big filmmakers created their own kind of shorts thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, David Fincher supported Love, Death, and Robots, which is an
Yeah.
anthology series, which is more VFX animation.
Mm-hmm.
And then Neil Blomkamp,
I know who you're talking about, but yeah.
the director of District 9, Elysium, a bunch of other films, created Oat Studios, which was his kind of testing ground for short form content in the digital space as well, but there was some live action stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, those are shorts.
Yeah.
You know, they're on Netflix, they're on YouTube, they're all over the place. I think Oats is on Netflix now. Oat Studios is on Netflix as well. But, like, there is this outlet, but I think we have to stop treating that series as short form content and more about as the giant product as a whole. When you look at an anthology series, it's not really the individual episodes.
Right.
It's kind of the bigger picture, the bigger project, the bigger thing. And I think if we treat them as features, the dynamic changes, the conversation changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good segue to talk about features and kind of distribution for features.
Teach me.
And so you have your first feature coming up.
Yes.
Which we can't talk about.
We can, sort of. Not really.
and for me, my experience with features has always been kind of with screenwriting.
Right.
And pre-pandemic, I was very close to a deal with. I had a script that was shopped, or under a shopping agreement with a big production company, and we were talking to a comic book production company for adapting my script into an origin story for a character under that brand. And then the pandemic happened. And so my entry into or not my entry, but my path towards distribution, I think always comes down to networking.
Sure.
And then finding my niche as well. Because I, in the beginning, was all over the place. I was like, I can write whatever you want. Just give me a job.
Right.
And I had to stop treating it like a job, but also treating it like a job. So I'd wake up, go to work, and write.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go to somebody and be like, this is my job, give me a job. I had to treat it like as a friendship, as a network, as a networking thing, as a friendship thing. And so my experience has always been you find distribution through these partners, through production companies, through even commercial production companies, because sometimes they would want to venture out into feature films as well. One of the plans I had for a short film was, let me plan this out, beat it out, have a good kind of business plan, and then approach production companies that do only commercials, and then see if they wanted to fund it for a micro budget feature.
Right.
So getting him kind of set up at something is kind of the first step, and then the second step is a little out of my hands, because it's then their responsibility to take it to a studio or take it to a streamer. And I think nowadays a lot of companies are tied to streamers. They won't put anything in production feature wise unless it's already going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So me talking to some folks now, they're like, cool, we know the producers of this horror franchise, like, what do you got? And I pitch them something, they're like, we love this idea, write a synopsis. I'm in the midst of that. And so they already have like a production team in mind who already have distribution routes.
Right.
So like, as a writer and a creator, it's like, oh, it's a little bit easier because you don't have to think about it. But then as someone who's crafting a film from scratch, and then you're like, I finished a film, what do I do? Oh.
Which is interesting, because in the last, I guess, the first half of this year, what I was hearing a lot of was people just saying, just go make the movie.
Yeah.
Just, everything is a mess.
Yeah.
Go indie, go make your movie, and then there's all this demand for content, etc., etc. So I heard the opposite of that, where everyone's like, just go make the movie, because you're not gonna get it made.
Yeah.
So,
but that's like saying, oh, just go write the screenplay, except for you have to spend $100,000, $200,000 on the script.
Yeah.
The risk is you can write the screenplay, but is there someone to buy it?
Yeah.
Even if there's demand. I think there's always a risk of it being good. I know we all believe in our craft and in our passion for stuff, but sometimes you make something and it's fine, Like,
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you've lived with it. You had a good time with it, and you know, you're letting it go into the world. But then everyone's like, "Cool, I don't want that." You know, I don't want to.
Mhm.
I don't want to put that on my platform.
Mhm.
So there's always that risk because you
Oh,
can't just make
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people were shy about doing that. And then we're just, like in the last 6 months,
Mm.
just told if you really want to get it made, you just got to make it
You make
yourself,
it
you know, and
yourself.
you're just
Yeah.
like suddenly have a film on your hands and you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what are
Exactly.
you
And
going to
then
do?
you're like, please take this. They're like, I'll give
Right.
you $10,000 for it. And you're like,
But
crap.
so what,
Yeah.
this is my question for you. Like, I don't know if you know about this process at all, but what if, for example, you have a film
Mhm.
and you went out and shot it and now you have this feature
Yeah.
that you love?
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
So remember that analogy about the treehouse
Uh-huh.
and how in corporate America you climb the ladder, and in film there's no ladder, and sometimes there's no treehouse. I guess it's that. It's like however you can. You know, there's people that I know who've self-released a film. They've taken it on tour where they'll rent out movie theaters, promote it themselves, and then go across America, and they'll make their money back for a low-budget feature.
Right.
And then through that process, they'll, get a theatrical release or a limited theatrical release or get it on Hulu or Netflix. Sometimes you can go to a film market, Cannes, AFM here in Los Angeles, and then Palm Springs International Film Market, I believe. Maybe there's one in Venice too. They're everywhere. Take it there. Be like, I have a movie, and they'll be like, cool, give me 2 more and I'll buy all 3, or whatever. So there's these places where you can sell a film, or you can kind of use it to make money, or even kind of do your own self release on iTunes or Amazon Prime. But the answer is it's always changing.
Yeah.
And it's nebulous, and it's however you can. You know what I mean?
Because I've had friends who have done that, the Amazon Prime and iTunes kind of self-publishing route. And it's so interesting because I feel like the Amazon one especially is such a wild west out there.
Because you can get nothing or everything. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And then one thing I'll say is I remember I was an intern for a big production company who just won an Oscar for a film, and I handled their review process for their like film distribution. So they also handle distribution. And I'm not saying that like they gave me all their films because they don't want to watch them and they just made their intern do it, but I was kind of like the first wall of defense. And so what you could do is just call a production company, be like, hi, we have a film we made, it won a festival, like do you want to watch it and distribute it? And as long as it fits their niche and their kind of mandate,
right,
why not?
Yeah.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's the attitude a lot of us have, right? What are you going to lose?
Yeah.
It's just,
as long as you're not like being kind of that weird network, you're like, give me something for whatever, what do you got to lose? My partner recently is producing a film and they wanted to shoot on film. They're like, let's just call Kodak. And they did. And they're like, we want film. And Kodak's like, cool, we have short ends. We'll sell them to you for like 1/3 of the price.
Amazing.
They're shooting on film now.
There you go. Give it a go.
Well, so distribution is tricky because it's like having a career in film. It's always changing. It'll remain the same, I think, for some projects or for some things for a little bit, but it's always going to be a nebulous thing.
Right.
And I hope your work continues to find a home, and
thank you.
I hope people find homes for their work so we can watch it and tell them how cool it is. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the IndieWood Podcast. You can find us on anywhere you find your podcasts and on Instagram at IndieWoodPod. See you next time.
From the CFA Network, Cinematography for Actors is bridging the gap through education and community building. Find out about us and listen to our other podcast at cinematographyforactors.com.
Cinematography for Actors Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit. For more information on fiscal sponsorship, donations, because we're tax exempt now, so it's a tax write-off, and upcoming education, you can email us at contact@cinematographyforactors.com. Thanks.